Hey guys, so right now we're going to talk about the middle tier of the Western Conference of OWL. Just to kind of re-preface again, I think this tier list is more just to talk about the overview of the rosters more so than anything and what they're doing in the offseason and kind of what you guys should expect of these teams going into the season. I think it's kind of a fool's errand to predict the future exactly, getting the exact power ranking is going to be tumultuous, but I think what we can do right now is just kind of talk about the rosters and where we think they're roughly at least from my perspective. And I think this tier is going to be really exciting to talk about. I think maybe the bottom tier, you don't have much hope that they'll catch any championship possibility, but I think these middle tiers, I mean the teams in these middle tier are volatile, I will say at the least. Like I could see them doing really, really well in some of these cases. I could also see them falling short of expectations as well. But I think that's what's exciting about the middle is that they all can be really dark horses in the Western Conference of OWL. So let's look at the first roster. Actually, let's look at Outlaws Overwatch roster first. Let's talk about the Houston Outlaws. They're a fan favorite by many, and they kept not many people, to be honest. They've had a huge overturn in their roster. Most notably, they dropped kind of their Korean half from last year, and a big, like pretty much 5 or 6 of their players from their starting lineup. So they've looked to kind of full wipe this team and head in a new direction. And the key part of that, I think, in here is Junkbuck. Junkbuck is probably the person you're looking at the most. I know Cool Matt has been promoted to general manager as well. I'm not exactly sure their system, who gets say into what, but let's assume it's somewhat collaborative. You got a whole new set of people making decisions for this team, and that probably leads to a lot of these people getting removed from the roster, not getting repicked up, and them having a brand new roster. So this year is if you're an Outlaws fan, you're used to these rebuilds. Every year you get hyped. You're like, oh, we there were some bright spots last year. I think this one is where you're really looking for that full rebuild, and like you can expect a little bit more coming out of this team, to be honest. So Junkbuck, let's talk about Junkbuck first. He was an assistant on Shock previously, the 2-time champion Shock. He also led the Overwatch World Cup team along with Arrow. So this guy's got, just wins on wins on wins under his belt. I love Junkbuck. I'm a big Junkbuck fan myself. He's really talented. So I think this will be like kind of a pressure year for him too. This is his first year out of Krusty's wing. If he wants to go with his own narrative that he's, a good coach in his own right, it wasn't just Krusty. Like this is his year to show it. And I'm positive he is a great coach. So, that's just the outside narrative, but that pressure maybe a little bit mounts on him, but he's cool under pressure, I'm sure. But let's talk about the key pieces they've kept. So Dante in particular is the most exciting piece that they had to get first. He was the first guy re-announced, and he was kind of the main person they had to get going into this offseason, him going under free agency. So Dante, really exciting player. I think we all know a lot about Dante, so I won't talk too much about him, but just really exceptional Tracer Sombra player, to say the least, and we can see that he can flex out of it as well. They also brought back Hydration under the DPS role, and I think he gets to go back to kind of his core competencies, at that being kind of the projectile player. I won't even call him a flex player because, I don't think he goes to Tracer too often or anything like that, but he's much more a core projectile player. So, the things that you've seen Hydration on before that he's been exceptional on, Pharah, Doomfist, Junkrat, these types of heroes, I expect him to kind of pull that out and for the team to utilize that. And when he's in, it's going to be super obvious that they're looking for one of those more niche heroes that he does well on, but he's exceptional at those things, right? So those are the two pieces they brought back. But let's talk about everyone else they brought in. So I think we should first start at the tanks, because I don't know if many people know Piggy and Jonggu. I had to, be more familiar with them coming into this season, but Piggy and Jonggu come from Talon Esports, as you can see here. And I was talking to Junkbuck, but he knew they played Shock. Sorry, Shock played Talon in Korea while prepping for the finals, right? So he got to see how good these guys were, and this was their meta for sure. Just to give background on Jonggu and Piggy, just so that you guys kind of know what to expect from these guys. Jonggu was actually not a main tank player originally. He was a long time ago, I think on GC Busan 2 years ago, so really old in Overwatch. 2 years ago, he was a DPS player. He got converted into main tank somewhere along the way. I don't know the exact point he flipped to main tank, but that's really exciting as a proposition. So you could imagine his best heroes are actually going to be more like the frag DPS style heroes. And I think it goes maybe in this order. I'm not exactly sure, but his hog is like I know that was a big thing in that meta at that time, and he's a really good hog. His ball's really good, and his Rhine's really good. And I'm not saying he's not good at the other heroes, but like if it ever goes to a hog meta, Jonggu's going to be on the top, I think, for sure. And his ball looks really good. Just like oddly, DPS players play ball really well. I don't know what it is about him, but yeah. Jonggu comes from that kind of background, so he's kind of this new main tank blood, but you know he's exciting in his own right. That this is going to be his first year in OWL with the highest competition. Where I thought he did well in the in Talon's region, the Pacific region, very very well, obviously. Piggy, known in ladder as just a hard grinder. You could see his games on ladder. He plays a ton. But also he's kind of known as a Sig one trick. His Diva isn't quite there. He doesn't have as much experience on Diva, but this guy's Sigma is really exceptional. The Sigma nerf certainly hurt Piggy, but he's a very, very good Zarya as well, I can tell you. So he's more that Sigma Zarya. His Diva is not that great, but I think he's a grinder, so any hero he grinds, he'll be good on. So Junkbook, I think, kind of saw Talon in Korea when they were prepping for finals. So this is kind of where these guys come from is Talon. And they have pre-existing synergy. They've worked together. So you can expect them to kind of be better right off the start, I think, as far as tank line goes. I think the other things that we can talk about, the main people are Happy and Crimzo, right, on the starting roster. Happy is also someone, like, I think everyone knows how good he is at Widow. I mean, this guy's a hit scan monster, absolutely. So I think that's a really great pickup, complementing kind of the rest of the DPS. They have a 5 DPS roster, which is really odd. But you know, we'll see how they get utilized. I imagine they'll prune down a lot more. But you know, Krusty, Junkbuck, I myself want lots of DPS players because DPS players, great. There's so many DPS heroes. I want exceptional DPS players. Happy is going to be exceptional on the Widow and the hit scans, especially. And I think he's a lot more flexible than people think. But with 5 DPS, we'll see how much you're able to flex, right? But Happy is a great get from the hit scan spot. I think people who really like Linkster, like Happy is an upgrade, I think, in that regard. Crimzo's one of the more hyped up NA flex supports, and well deservedly, right? This will be his time. I think he was a shining spot on the Dallas roster, and we'll see if he gets to be if he's on a better team, you know, like what he's able to do. So Crimzo really flexible, I think, within the flex support role. So that's going to be really exciting. I think Juby, we got to talk about his support duo right here. Juby is someone, you know, I was interested in. I know he did well in the Outlaws trial, evidently. He comes from Collegiate, but he's more just like a ranked player, to be honest. And you look at his match experience, it's actually not a lot. It's just some random times on second wind and stuff like that. And he played on, I forget the team. I think it was Harrisburg. Sorry, I don't know why I'm blanking on that. Harrisburg. So, you know, he was on the top of those teams, but now he's like fully committed. So he's going to be a much more raw talent coming in, but you can expect him to be a hard grinder. And I think that's what Junkbuck is looking for, is hard grinders. I see across this list, people play the game a lot. Not to ignore these pickups, but I just don't know how often they'll be used. And this is probably my own folly. I'm not exactly sure, but KSF kind of is this weird. He's a flex player. Like he can play Genji, he can play Hitscan, he can play Pharah. He's kind of this really wide tool that can be used. But I don't know if he's like particularly specialized. Is a problem, right? Like, is he really exceptional at any of these heroes? Is he going to outperform Happy on the Widow? Maybe not. Is he going to outperform, you know, Hydration on the Projectile? Maybe not. So it's kind of this odd, but when the meta is going to be more flexible, KSF could see a lot of playtime. And I think Jake is, I'm not really sure exactly because I haven't seen him play competitively in a while, but he gives the team a lot of direction. I can tell you from Season 1 OWL, whenever Jake was in, it just felt like they had better direction. I didn't think mechanically he was very good on Tracer, which was the role at the time, right? Him on Tracer and then Linkster was on Widow, but the team had really good direction with Jake, and that's what you can kind of expect. Jake, big brain, he's a really good at articulating his thoughts to his team. So he even mentioned that he might be kind of a player coach, which is an interesting dynamic. So maybe he can bring that player perspective more to the coaching staff and be part of the coaching staff to a smaller extent, right? Like I think that's going to be really interesting, but I'm not sure how much he'll be realistically used. It's really hard to say with these 5 DPS, but I imagine your ideal DPS lineup for highest skill cap is going to be Dante and Happy at any given time, you know? But I think this team has a lot of upside. You got to go with the coaching angle here. Like, this team's going to be successful, or this team might not be as successful if coaching isn't able to kind of permeate through as much as you'd like. Because I think you got Junkbuck, and Junkbuck's a legendary coach, 2-time champ. This guy's got to be able to make the Outlaws work, and that's why I think they can be tip-top. I think you look at the roster on paper, it's kind of clearly middle, but I think if they're going to be a dark horse, it's going to be because of Junkbuck. Okay, let's go to the other mixed team in the middle. Let's go talk about the Atlanta Reign. Atlanta Reign is like the proverbial middle, but you always feel like they are always the perpetual dark horse, right? They always show up to big matches. They kind of have that bad boy attitude about them, but they kind of talk trash, but they can also, handle when they get talk trash too. So I think this team's really interesting. They resanded a lot of their parts, and I think the main things that you should be really happy about are Elris on support. I forgot if it's Elris or Iris. I've asked him before. I forgot. Elris on support and Pelican are the main new additions, and the rest are a bunch of re-signs. So it's mostly the same Atlanta team from before, but there's also rumor of KSP possibly joining, being traded from the LA Valiant. So we'll see how that goes. I won't talk about it too much right now, but let's talk about their base, right? I think Elris, I think he's a upgrade to Dogman. Dogman's my guy, but I think Elris has a lot of upside. He came from 3rd Impact, which was one of the better teams in NA at the time, second to Doge a lot of the time, first and second to Doge a lot of the time. But Elris was always a standout, especially his Ana was super scary. I can tell you from scrims, his Ana is super scary. So I see a lot of upside in this guy. Currently, right now, I'm pretty sure he's rank 1 in Korea as well. So he's a grinder. He's really passionate. He's really commanding, I think, too. He's really communicative on his team. So I think this is going to be a seamless transition from Dogman to Elris, except, higher mechanical skill from Elris. He's a really good player, and I think he's got a lot of upside. He's raw right now, but I think that'll, improve. So I'm really excited to see how he does throughout the season and his kind of trajectory throughout the season, personally, because I think it might start off slow, but he'll pick up as he gets more experience under his belt. Pelican. Okay, Peli is absolutely nuts. I think this is a highlight spot. He's what we thought Erster was in Season 2 when they brought him in, except I think he's even better than Erster at Erster's peak. Pelican is really young blood. He's came from O2, which, him and Proper were the reason O2 was ever scary at all, to be honest. Or the main reason, sorry. Him and Proper would just pop off. Pelican, I think we even saw in the Valiant Ball, was a standout in that team. You can just see how good he is. He was playing Echo 24/7 in that, but he was super good. He's super flexible as well. Can play Tracer, can play Genji, can play Hanzo. He can play everything, I think. So Pelican is a really exciting part of this roster, I think. A really exciting addition to this team. I imagine he's full-time playing DPS. I think he's really high DPS quality, and he's really flexible, and you can probably jam him in any meta, and his player quality will really show. So Pelican, I'm really excited for. Elris, I'm super excited for as additions to this team. I think if you're looking backwards, Atlanta doesn't make super big sweeping changes to their rosters, generally speaking. Brad, Seffi, great scout. He gets the better talent. He knows Elris is really good. He knows Pelican's really good. So he has great pickups. And then we can talk about the people Brad has faith in, right? Brad's always been a really good scout. He has faith in. I think we got to talk about the tank line between Gator and Hawk. They've been a tank duo for what now? The past 3 years, 2.5 years. So this is the the best NA tank line together that we've seen for a long time, and they've had a lot of synergy together. Gator's a really interesting player because, just knowing his background, he's much more that Rhine player from being on the team called Goats, right? But I think Gator is really interesting because I think his Rhine's really his signature hero, but I think his Orisa is also really, really great too. I haven't seen enough of his ball recently, but I expect that to be okay, and his Winston's okay as well. So he's fairly flexible, but I think the team will be very exceptional if you get Gator on one of his strengths, which is Reinhardt or Orisa, personally. I think Hawk is also super flexible. I think all his heroes are really, really good. He's really, really aggressive. He's an absolute fragger. So this tank line thrives on aggression. So if it's not too much dive where the tanks are kind of at the whim of DPS, I think these guys can really shine. Even if it's double shield on obviously in Rhine comps as well, these guys really know how to push their limit on this, and they bring that raw aggression to the Atlanta Reign play style that people have gotten accustomed to. I think as well, Masa maybe didn't have the best year last year, but if you believed in Masa in Season 2, he had a down year in Season 3, you can believe that in Season 4 he's gonna pick it back up, just back to the Season 2 former GOATS glory of Masa, where Masa was, one of the top 3 supports in the league, main supports in the league at his position. So his Mercy hasn't looked too impressive, but I think those things are a time-based thing. As long as Masa is grinding like he normally does, I'm optimistic as well. Let's talk about Sharp and the possible KSP pickup as well, because I think Sharp got some playtime towards the end of the season on Hitscan, looked really good actually. But I think if they do get KSP, this is where the team is actually going to look like really scary, really dark horse. Like if you told me a DPS line of Pelican and KSP existed, I'd be really scared. And that's not to say that Sharp isn't very good on his own, but I think KSP is that next level. So if they do get KSP, I'm really excited. If it is Sharp, I think you should still be excited because you have Sharp and Eddie. You guys can play anything that you want. I think with these 3 DPS, Pelican's so flexible, Sharp and Eddie are flexible for hitscan DPS. So I think you can play in any single meta and be fine with these DPS. If they add KSP, I think you just add to your top end. You make your DPS line really scary. So Atlanta's kind of still that classic scary dark horse middle team, but not quite, tip top. And I think they'll be tip top if the non-DPS, the tanks and the supports kind of rise up to the top end. I think that's where you're really going to see this team have more success. Is their DPS are going to be terrifying as per usual, but it's going to be their tanks and supports that are going to get them, that top end of the league if they want to be there. Okay, now we're going to the Korean teams. Again, this is in no particular order, so I'm not saying Toronto Defiant is better than Atlanta Reign. We're just saying they're roughly in the same tier right now, just for preseason kind of hype. Toronto, really interesting team. I don't know who their GM is exactly, but I know they've just had very wide swings. You think back to Season 2, I mean, they had basically O2, right, with Yakpong, Stellar, like all these guys, they kind of just grabbed the Korean Contenders team a lot of the time, from Season 2, and then they kind of dished that, went back to full Canadian, Pride of Canada. I know this was a big point for them, is to be really marketable, and they got that from last year with Surefour, Agilities, Mangachu. I mean, Kariv's really popular as well, Roki's really popular, like these guys are all really marketable, and then they swing back to full Korean. So I'm a little confused at the direction, but they're making massive changes every year, and it's clear they are willing to invest to win too. So they got big names. They basically got half of Philadelphia Fusion, which is crazy because that's the team that was first in NA OWL last season, right? This team shouldn't just be middle, if you told me that, but I do think that Philly kept the best parts of the Philly roster. I'm not saying that the other parts that Defiant got weren't as good. I'm just not sure it's as well-rounded with all these guys and with their additions. So I'm not trying to be as critical here because I think this is still a really good roster, a really scary roster. So let's talk about the first thing again. Head coach KDG comes in for Fusion, goes 26-2 or something like that in his first season. Gets a grand finals finish, top 4 finish. Gets removed for 9K. I guess Philly just goes in another direction, right? But he's got his boys on Toronto Defiant, and he got them all. He got most of his boys back onto Toronto Defiant. So KDG was on Seoul before he even got Michelle back from Season 2 Seoul. So, I mean, this is KDG and friends over here, and this team looks scary as hell, no? Let's talk about, like, their acquisitions, right? Like, Sato, Hisu came from Philly, and these guys are crazy good. Sato, I don't know if he has a bad main tank. He's really good on all of them. I thought his Rhine was a weakness, but Philly played a lot of Rhine. His Rhine looked really good on Philadelphia. I think he got a great understanding of Rhine because Philly ran it so much. His Winston, that's the hero he made his bread and butter on. I think his Orisa is really, really good. That's a Season 1 classic of Sato. He was really, really good on Orisa. Ball I haven't seen too much of, to be honest, and I'm a little worried about that. But, Sato's really flexible. I think a really great main tank in the free agency market. This is a really good pickup. Hisu is someone I'm really excited about. I mean, I think he always got kind of overshadowed by Carpe on Fusion, and he might not have gotten as much playtime as he wanted. I know that's definitely got to be a big thing for him, is he wants to be the standout player for his team, and boy, does he have his opportunity here. I think this is a great time for him to show how good of a player he is, because I think Hisu is really nuts. Like, you talk about him always with Carpe, I think, before, but I think he's really great in his own right, but he's not a tracer player. So he's got everything. His tracer is still good, but he's not like a bona fide tracer player, I would say. His Sombra is really good. His Reaper is really good. I think you saw him more on hit scan towards the end anyway, and I think that's where his kind of strengths, that's what he likes playing more than anything. And I think Hisu's going to really thrive on this team with all the playtime he's getting. I know that's what he wants, but that's a cornerstone of this team, I think, is going to be how good is Hisu. Because if Hisu's really good, I think Toronto will be really, really good. And I think this guy's an explosive DPS. I think this guy's going to be a really good DPS in the league for years to come. I think this is his chance to shine. Let's talk about the parts that they kept, though. So, and then the rest they got in free agency, right? Logix and Beast. I'm not really sure how these pickups happened. Because Beast seems really out of place on this roster, just speaking quite frankly, right? Sato, I think, plays every hero very, very well. And, Beast's best heroes are also Sato's best heroes. So it's a really odd combination that Beast is there. But Logix makes perfect sense, I think, because Logix is one of the best tracers in the league, I think. He's a hard tracer player, has tons and tons of experience on it, always really good on it. Communication is going to be a little weird since he's one of the only English speakers on this team, but Logix kind of just being slotted into that tracer spot, I could see being very successful. So I like that they maintain that part. And Beast, I'm really more unsure of. They might have picked him up and then saw the opportunity with KDG and Philadelphia Fusion and got them later, and then, already signed them. That's kind of like the order of events as I remember it, but I'm not really sure. Maybe they do have a greater purpose for Beast. Let's talk about their support line. Aztec is really exciting. I mean, so Muse is on our team from WGS. Muse loves Aztec. Aztec is a really good flex support coming from WGS. If you saw any of the WGS games, he's a really great player, standout player on Ana and Zenyatta. I think their Ana was a really good reason why WGS was so successful the time they beat Runaway, right? But he's also a great Zen in his own right, to give him credit. So, I mean, Aztec I'm really excited about. I'm surprised Boston, honestly, traded him away, but Myeonbong's really good as well, so that's fine, but I think Aztec is just as good as Myeonbong, if not better. So I'm really excited for the Aztec picture. And Unsanjae was on Element Mystic, so you already know he's a great player because he's a young blood, 18 from EM. So you got to be excited about this support line. I think brand new duo, but really exciting, really high potential. I think Michelle and Nace, right? Michelle didn't get much playtime on Soul, and I'm not really sure why. Soul's always been really weird with utilizing their lineup, but Marvel has essentially turned into Soul's off tank in season 3, right? Where Michelle was like very clearly the off tank in season 2. Michelle just kind of died out in Soul's rotation in season 3. So for him to come back, I think this has got to be a redemption year for him, to show what he's got, that he's still got it, that he's still able to be at the top of his game. So I think for Michelle, like, I haven't seen him play in so long, so I can't really say how good he is, but I remember in season 2, I thought he was very good. This season's going to be his year to stand out, I think, on Toronto. Everyone's got a lot to prove on this roster, so I'm really excited about that. Naste, NA first. I'm not sure how to say this guy's name, to be honest. But he's the third DPS that kind of rounds up your DPS. You have Hisu, who's more clearly a hit scan but can flex player. Logic, much more of a tracer but can flex to hit scan player. Now you have Naste, who's the flex player. He's plays tracer. He plays everything. He plays a little bit of everything, but he's clearly much more on the projectile side. This guy was hyped up 2 years ago. He was on Philadelphia Fusion's academy team for a long time on T1. His hype kind of died down. I'm not really sure why. I haven't kept great track of him in contenders, but he's a really great player. I know he's had hype around him for a long time. He's a long-time winner too, just going with Philadelphia Fusion Academy, or Fusion University. Forgot that's what they called it. But yeah, he's always been a really standout player on whichever team he's on. So I'm really excited about this. I think this team's got a lot to prove. It's a tight roster. It's a really tight roster, but I think you're going to get a more clear style from this roster. Like, I could already imagine that they're going to lean towards their strengths in these rosters and kind of figure out problems together. So I'm a big fan. This roster has essentially turned full Korean. In the staff, it's full Korean as well. So this is kind of a huge pivot from Toronto. They pivot from full Korean to marketable Western back to full Korean. They've made a lot of changes. So as a fan, I'm not sure if it's really easy to root for this team. I know people of Toronto, strong people. Sounds weird to say, but these guys are diehard about their sports teams in Toronto. I know that they have huge fan loyalty. But so Toronto, I'm hoping they do well for their fan base, because it has been confusing to get jerked around that they've wiped their roster every single year. I want to see them kind of use this roster to rebuild or kind of get some sort of stability, because, what are they looking for? Are they looking for marketability, or are they looking to be competitive? This year, it looks like they're trying to be as competitive as possible, so I'm really happy about this roster. Okay, last but definitely not least, I feel like it's so bad to put this team in middle tier. Like, I want to put these guys in S tier, but I also wanted to talk about 4 teams per video. So I think this team is based, like, I'm giving you a sneak peek into what I think the top tier is, and them being outside of it is just so slight. I think it's so slight when I compare to the other 4 teams in the Western Conference of OWL, just slightly behind, but I really think that they're basically there. These guys were the bona fide third best team in North America, and I think they've upgraded their roster in a lot of senses. So let's talk about the Florida Mayhem, because I mean, I think it's I've talked to Kuki. These guys work together to kind of build the roster. I know has a lot more control, and I think he does a lot of great things with the lineups, and they're doing a lot of great things with the lineups to improve it from last year, which was already a really great lineup. So I'm really excited about this. Kuki's a great coach in his own right. Like, I really believe Kuki's a great coach. So they've again gone with a really small roster, but let's talk about the parts that they've got rid of and upgraded essentially. So I think, like, this is my opinion, that their weakest part of their roster was actually Chris. Chris was the weakest part of their roster, and he looked good because he was on a good team, was my opinion, but I'm not saying he's like really, really bad. I just thought he was like a clear weak link in the roster. That they've upgraded to Slime, and Slime's got a championship pedigree. You talk about this guy, and he definitely has that championship pedigree from Runaway, from Titans. He knows what it's like to be in those pressure situations, and he's a really great player mechanically and everything. You remember him in Season 2 GOATs, his Lucio mechanics, his decision-making, his raw aggression, really, really good. So I'm really excited for Slime because I thought Chris was the weakest part, and they've upgraded that to a top-tier main support. So that's really exciting. And then we got to talk about OG, my boy OG. So Mayhem traded away Fate to Shanghai Dragons for a Fate and Moon reunion. But I think they got someone just as good. I think Fate is really, really good. Honestly, Fate has got to be one of the best tanks in Overwatch League. He's really flexible. I think his Ryan's a little bit like not so good, but he's really flexible, really smart, takes control of the game. I have such a high opinion of this guy from Season 1. He was so good in Season 1. It was so clear that his team was just following his calls all the time, that he was controlling that team. That being said, I think OG kind of slots in really, really well for what Fate's specialties were. OG is a really good Winston. I think one of the best Winstons in the entire league. I know it didn't show on Gladiators last year, but skill-wise, not talking about the team, his own thing, I think he's up there with Smurf, absolutely, and I think he's one of the top Winstons in the league, along with Gesture, Smurf, all those guys. I think OG is really good. I think he slots in relatively perfectly with Fate as well. OG is really flexible. I think his weakest point is going to be Orisa, for sure, but his Rhine is an upgrade from Fate's, in my opinion. I think OG's Rhine, you didn't get to see it played because Cloudy was always playing the Rhine in Gladiators in Season 3, but OG's Rhine I thought was always really, really good. Cloudy's was just exceptional, right? But OG's Ryan, OG's always prided himself on being a really flexible main tank. His ball's really good mechanically as well. I think you could see in the Valiant Ball as well. He was kind of standing out on ball, doing a lot of sick mechanical plays on ball, living where you didn't think he could live. They kind of just had poor team coordination during that tournament for whatever reason, but OG looked really, really good. So I'm really happy about both those two pickups. And last but not least, we got to talk about Checkmate, right? So they dropped some of their DPS players. Sideshow, obviously, big hit to them. And Saya player, who was kind of on his way out already as far as retirement goes, stopped playing the game as much. Checkmate comes from Oz, right? I think this guy's a promising young talent. He's very raw, but he's kind of a flex DPS that I think can play a good bit of everything. So I'm really excited for this guy because you see some holes with Yaki and BQB. Yaki, I think you want playing all the time. I'll get to Yaki later, but Checkmate, I think, complements this roster well. I know they did tryouts for it, so they must have saw something in him that was really, really good. I know he's a hard grinder. I know I see him in ranked all the time. He's always on top of leaderboards. Checkmate's, not many people know about him, but I wouldn't be surprised if this guy turns into a starting rotation player for Mayhem, but I also wouldn't be surprised because BQB is so good that, they kind of shift around depending on the meta, the DPS line. Let's talk about Yaki. Okay. I think this guy is actually one of the best DPS in the league. I think he's... I don't want to put him in Prophet tier because I think Prophet's in a tier of his own, but I think he's pretty much Prophet tier. I think this guy is absolutely crazy. On every hero he plays, every DPS hero he plays and practices, he's insane. His Tracer alone is standout, I think. This guy's an absolute monster on Tracer, but I think his player quality is so high. You put him on any hero, I could put Yaki on ball, I'm sure he'd do great. I have so much confidence in Yaki. I think he's the cornerstone of this team. I also think this is what makes them so scary. I think this is what makes them... I think basically that top tier. Right now we're talking about the middle tier, but I said Mayhem's basically top tier. I think Yaki's a big reason. If they didn't have Yaki, if they had anyone else, I would be really saying they're probably middle, but Yaki I think puts them over the top. I cannot say how good I think Yaki is and how much I think he's gonna shine this year, but I think he already shined last year. But I think this guy's insane. I just can't give this guy enough praise. I think this guy's absolutely insane. I think it'll be even clearer this year if Mayhem do really well, and I hope they do really well. Actually, I don't hope they do well as another team in the Western Conference, but whatever. So Yaki's super flexible. He's always playing in your lineup. If he's not playing in your lineup with BQB and Checkmate, it's a throw. I think it's a hard throw if Kuki doesn't play Yaki in every single meta. There has to be some exceptional reason that he doesn't play. Gangnam Jin, really, really good. Really good flex support. I think, we can talk about their former parts. BQB was most improved. from last year, right? Like, he was standing out on hit scan, especially when we got to see so much Tracer hit scan metas, right? With Ashe, with Hanzo, there was a May Hanzo a little bit too. BQB was always really, really great. I don't think BQB is that tip-top tier. I don't think he's that Ons, that Bird Ring type of tier where he's this crazy hit scan, but I do think he's right below. So, but if BQB keeps trending upwards and gets towards that S tier, this team will be really freaking scary, I can tell you. Gargoyle, I think, is really underrated, actually. I think this guy is really flexible, really good on every hero I see. He's super smart. He's super smart player. I think this guy's really good on a lot of heroes. His Gargoyle, his Sigma was so good throughout the year. I mean, Sigma was the mainstay of off tank in Season 3, and he was really exceptional at it. He might even be a Sig one trick. I don't know. I haven't seen a lot of the other stuff. His Diva looked really good. I know his Zarya is really good from when they played Goats, I believe, back on WGS Armament. That's a throwback. That was a Goats team. That was really good. I think Gargoyle is a really good, underrated off tank as well. So I'm really excited about this team because we already saw them do so well last year. I think that this year, I'm hoping they do even better. This team's really scary. I don't think they have like the star, not the star power. Like, they don't have the narrative that they're a great team, and this is really weird because they had won, I believe, the May Melee. I forget which one it was called. I believe they won the May Melee. I mean, this team deserves the credit, absolutely. These guys are great. I think Yez doing a great job. I think Kuki's doing a great job. Docs and Insight too. I've heard good things about them. I think this team is kind of the low-key good, like the really underrated, but that's what makes them really scary. They don't have the standout names like Sparkle or whatever. I don't think Yaki's a household name yet, and I have no idea why because I think this guy's insane again. But Mayhem's basically in that top tier, I think. I think they're just a smidge below these other teams, and I really think it's a small smidge. Any given meta, I could see them performing better. Any given match, any given day, I think they're a little bit better, but on paper right now, I gotta place them just right below them. But this team's really exciting. I think Florida is going to be a really good team. I think in the next video, I sound really excited now, but in the next video, talking about the top teams, I think that's going to be super, super fun because I was already really excited about Florida's roster, and I can't tell you how excited I am for the Gladiators roster as well. So, again, let me know if I need to change the format. Right now, I'm kind of just doing freeform and talking about each team and kind of their roster decisions throughout the offseason and kind of trying to build the narrative for those teams. But let me know if you guys like this format right now. Next week or next time I do a video, it's going to be of the top tier of NA, and I really think these guys are the ones that you're looking for to be the representatives from NA going into the next season. So I'm really excited for these teams. It's going to be a fun year of Overwatch League regardless, I think. So thanks guys for watching. See ya.